Well, video professionals everywhere are used to seeing major updates to Blackmagic's DaVinci Resolve software every April. This year, the announcement of DaVinci Resolve 21 really caught the attention of photographers all across the world with the debut of the new Photos tab. Headlines suddenly popped up all over the internet proclaiming that Lightroom and Capture One suddenly had new competition. But do they? Well, I've spent a little bit of time with the Resolve 21 beta, and I've got some thoughts. I'm Jordan Drake, this is PetaPixel. Let's talk about DaVinci Resolve. Look, even if you're primarily a photographer, if you're looking at DaVinci Resolve, you probably have some interest in, at the very least, editing together some photo montages using nonlinear editing software. And if that's the case, I have a great deal for you brought to our friends at Audio. You see, Audio has a massive library of rights-free music created by actual human beings, real artists. And unlike licensing each song individually, they have an offer where you can get lifetime access to their entire catalog. Now, usually this is going for just under $500, which is actually a pretty fair price for the expansive library that they have, but I can do way better for you. If you use coupon code PetaPixel199, you can get lifetime access to this entire musical catalog for only $199. That's $300 off, an absolutely smoking deal. So if you do any video editing or photo montages, I definitely recommend checking out audio.com. Again, use coupon code PetaPixel199 to take advantage of this sweet deal. Now let's talk about Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve. All right, let's do a little history lesson about Resolve. So when this was first launched, it was an industry standard video grading platform, but over the last decade, it's expanded rapidly to become a full-featured video editing program. But very importantly, Resolve saw enormous adoption over that time as most of its tools were available in the free version of the program. Sure, you could get the paid studio version, which allowed access to higher resolution exports, AI tools, better GPU performance, but by and large, you could complete a lot of very professional projects just using the free version of this software. Now, I use Resolve quite often when I need to do raw video processing or advanced motion tracking, so I was quite curious about the new Photos tab, but I also wanted to talk to PetaPixel technical editor Jeremy Gray, who is primarily a photographer, and see how accessible these tools were for people without a Resolve background. So we've talked quite extensively, and he's been able to corroborate a lot of my findings. So let's take a look at the Resolve 21 beta, which is now in its second version, and you can see we have a new Photos tab right here. This section will allow you to import, organize, and process RAW files from Canon, Nikon, Sony, Fujifilm, and you can also use industry standard Adobe DNG files. However, RAW formats from other companies like Panasonic simply won't import using this tab, but hopefully we see support for other RAW files in the near future. But interestingly, the imported files would have various degrees of lens correction applied. So bringing in Sony RAW files shot with the Sigma 35mm Art II already had distortion and vignetting correction applied to them. However, when I brought in Canon R5 Mark II files shot with the new 14mm f1.4, none of the lens corrections were applied. Now, absolutely, this software gives you the ability to correct for those things, but it's a little jarring to import all your RAW files and be greeted with an image with heavy distortion and vignetting in them. Once your images have been imported, you'll see a basic set of adjustments. So you can tweak things like your crop, exposure, tint, white balance, and all of these adjustments are actually very responsive, even if you're working with high-resolution files. Now, if these are the only adjustments that you need to make, you can export from right within the Photos tab. All right, the topic of exporting brings me to the biggest limitation with the free version of Resolve if you are a photographer. So however you export your images within this, if you're using the free version of the software, it is capped at 4K resolution. So for photographers, that's around an 8 megapixel export size. Now, absolutely, the studio version does not have this limitation, but that is paid software. So unlike when editing video projects, where I would say the free version of Resolve is more than enough for even some professional tasks, honestly, photographers are not going to be satisfied with the free version of this software unless they're just exporting very small files for social media. This is such a huge limitation, we actually contacted Blackmagic to confirm that you can't export those larger photo files, and that is definitely the case. And I think it's being very underreported online right now. Now, this isn't the only limitation of using the free version of Resolve. As well, you won't have access to tethering, which is currently supported for both Canon and Sony cameras, and performance is going to be a little worse in the free version because it won't use your GPU for exports, but still, the file size limitation is the biggest drawback. One of the reasons Resolve is so popular with film and video professionals is the powerful toolset you can find under the Colors tab, and these are still going to be usable when you're working with photos. So you have things like a node-based workflow and very powerful masking and selective edit tools. Now, I know it may seem odd to photographers to make initial tweaks within the Photos tab and then do more advanced edits within the Color tab, but this is the process that people will use when working with raw video, so it makes sense that Blackmagic didn't want to mess up the workflow here. And while for photographers, this aspect of Resolve might initially be intimidating, there are an absolute pile of tutorials online, and there's a good reason that every colorist I've talked to for the last decade uses Resolve as their primary tool. This brings me to my main reason for recording this video, which is to answer the question, is this a replacement for Lightroom or Capture One? And at this point, the answer is not yet. Obviously, the free version limitation of only being able to export small files makes this a non-starter for professional editing work. If you're looking for free software, I would definitely recommend checking out Canva's Affinity, which I've had really good success with. But even if you do purchase the studio version of this software, I think the lack of support for some RAW files, the inconsistency of applying lens corrections on import, and honestly, just the learning curve of learning a workflow that was designed for moving images means Resolve is not going to be my first choice if you're looking for dedicated photo editing software. However, for users like me who are regularly combining photo and video assets into a project, this update to Resolve is hugely useful. My workflow is typically to use dedicated photo processing software, edit the photos, export them as JPEGs, bring them into my video editing software, and if I need to make further revisions to those photos outside of what I can do with the exported JPEGs, then I have to go back to the photo editing software, make further tweaks to those, re-export them, re-import them into my NLE, and it's just a very clunky, cumbersome workflow where having the ability to process those raw files in the exact same software I'm already using is going to be a massive time saver for me. And let's not forget, if I want to have my photos and video match quite a bit better, I can apply the exact same corrections to both right within Resolve. And the primary limitation for photo editing, where I can't export large file sizes, is way less of a concern if I'm editing a video project. There I can import the full resolution photos, put them in my project, and still export that video clip at 4K, which is more than suitable for the work I do. Furthermore, now professional video editors and colorists are going to be able to use the exact same tools that they're very familiar with within Resolve and apply that knowledge to editing raw photos, as opposed to having to learn raw photography software that they're probably less familiar with. And if you look at a lot of documentaries, you'll see that the photos look very different from the video footage because they're worked on by two different people. Now we're going to see a lot more projects where I think these are going to match a lot nicer. So I really think a lot of places got the headline wrong when this new software came out. This is not free software that's going to compete directly with Lightroom and Capture One. However, if you're a video professional who's regularly using photos in your projects, well, the updates to Resolve 21 might change the way you work forever for the better. So thank you so much for joining me today here. If you found this interesting, well, you should know this conversation initially started on the PetaPixel podcast, where we talk about all the latest photo and video news. You can listen to it on all your favorite podcasting apps or watch it right here on this exact same YouTube channel. And if you appreciate the work we do, well, the best way to show that is by purchasing a PetaPixel membership. Only $3 a month or $30 a year. Not only do you get the warm feeling of knowing that you're supporting the PetaPixel team, but look at all of these great benefits that you'll get access to as well. Thanks so much for joining me in my office. We'll be back out in the field soon for another episode of PetaPixel.